Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Dr. Laura Socola with Vocal Impact Productions, and most importantly, today with the Speaking to Influence podcast, because that's what we're here to talk about today. It is all about preparing yourself or preparing your clients if you are somebody who is a uh, PR professional, a corporate communications professional, whether you're preparing your internal or external clients for a broader audience to get the word out, get the message out. We want to make sure that you're not just invited once to a show, because you get invited once to be on a stage or on a screen, most likely because somewhere along the lines you have a reputation for professional expertise. Okay, and that's a very critical component. But more importantly, you want to get invited back. You want to get invited to the show multiple times. You want to get invited. And here's the other thing, you want to get referred. You want people to listen to you, or you want people to be able to, you want the hosts to say, wow, that was a great interview. Let me introduce you to my friend who also has a podcast, and I'll tell them that you were a great interview. And this is how your reputation expands, right? So, this is all the stuff that we're going to talk about today. But before we get really off to the races, I would love to know, who are you? What brings you here today? Where are you? Who are you with? All that kind of stuff. Give us a little bit of background. So, we've got, wow, some people from England already. That's amazing. So, we've jumped the pond. I'm here in very not sunny Philadelphia, looking out the window, but hoping the rain holds off for a little bit longer. But share with us, and I'm going to share my screen a little bit because I do have some questions that I want to share with you, and I'd love to get your answers. Let's see, is it going to let me present? Here we go. Share my screen. Yeah, here we go. And of course, now it's going to be difficult. That just figures. We're going to let all this share. And if this doesn't work, and that's the problem with being live, right? Somehow tech always doesn't work. We had a massive reboot and reload of a bunch of things. I had to reload Teams. So, tip number one, when you're going to be on somebody's show, do a test run first and make sure all of your tech works. Now, when I'm running my show and my guests are coming on, the show itself is a 35-minute show plus or minus. So I'm doing Speaking to Influence, but I always leave an hour for that call, because sometimes this kind of stuff happens. The platform doesn't work. Your company or your client is used to using Teams or Google Meet, and the host is using Zoom or is using Riverside or is using StreamYard or something else. So if your computer isn't used to flexing that muscle, sometimes you have to reload an update. You have to then log out, relaunch the entire app, etc. So always make sure, if the host says, I need an hour for this call, give them the hour. Don't say, well, can they do it in 20 minutes? Most likely the answer is no. Unless your episode number 1, episode number 4 of a new podcast, in which case there's value to that. There are reasons to want to be one of the first guests on a show. We can get into that in a few minutes. But generally speaking, the host has done this enough that they know what works and they know what they need. They know what kind of buffer they need. They know how they need to support you. And here's what's most important. A good host, consciously or unconsciously, preferably consciously, they have one really important goal, and that is to protect you and your client. That is to protect your image, to protect your reputation, and to make sure that whatever the final product is that they put out, your guest sounds awesome. Your guest looks awesome. That we are elevating the individual, the company that they represent. We're doing everything possible to make them look and sound amazing. So they're done and they listen to the final episode, whether it's just audio or also on YouTube, on video as well. And they go, wow, that was awesome. I cannot tell you how many people I have had come on my show where when they've watched the episode afterwards, when the official one goes live, they go, man, I don't know how you did it, but you made me sound really good. And that's part of my job is not just in the prep call, which we'll talk about in a moment, to get you ready for your content and for your delivery, but also get you set up here. Make sure that your sound and your visuals all look good. So when the host gives instructions, follow them. I promise you, while they may seem momentarily inconvenient, there is a method to the madness, and an ounce of prevention is worth a metric ton of cure. Take it from me. So let's see here. And now I've done my diatribe, bit and pieces. Okay, so it's not going to let me share my screens today. That figures. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to talk about a variety of things. And I want you, so we see Sunny, we've got people in from Princeton, New Jersey to somewhere in England. And I bet a lot of people, probably not geographically in between, but metaphorically speaking, in between, which is great. So let's see what I want you to be aware of. And I'm going to ask you to take some notes as we go. Since for whatever reason, my screen sharing is not working today, some update on StreamYard that didn't work. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to realize that when you are so let me tell you a little bit about the podcast that I'm hosting so you understand lens because the lens of the show is mission critical. And what I want you to jot down first is understanding well, there's three people's needs who all need to be met. Okay. Three people's needs who all need to be met. And it's first and foremost your clients, assuming that it's or yours if you are the one who is on the show. And by the way, can you put in the chat, please, how many of you are joining today because you are a communications professional, PR, or corporate comms, something along those lines? And so you're prepping your people, you're prepping your executives for media appearances, podcasts, and other things. Or are you here for yourself? Or is it something else? Maybe you are someone who helps people write books, and so you know that your clients are going to be on a lot of podcasts to promote their book when they're done. So you have a niche, but it's still your clients who are really going to be more on the podcast, and maybe you are too, promoting your services. So is it are you the person who's going to be the absolutely rocking podcast guest, or is it your clients who are the guests? If you can jot that in the chat, it gives me a sense of what the perspectives are that we're looking at today, and I can make sure to answer those questions as well. And do yes, yes, yes. Use the chat. Use the chat as much as possible. Ask questions, make comments, ask for clarifications on certain things, give examples. I would love to know what's in your mind. I would love to know what resonates with you, what's not clear, or what about well, this situation, but what about that situation? Let's look for those points of distinctions because, depending on which side of the proverbial coin you're looking at, is it that God's in the details or the devil's in the details? Maybe a little bit of both. So I really do want to know what needs further clarification there. Okay, here for yourself. Terrific. Um, see other people for themselves. Good. So a lot of podcast guests, either current or aspiring. And if you've been on podcasts before, also please put that, how many times have you been on a podcast? Because a podcast is different from being on the radio, is different from being on television. I've done spots on NBC, on Fox News, on, PHL 17, a variety of different kinds of television appearances. But those interviews are 3 minutes. 4 minutes. They're super tight, which some of the skills are overlapping, but it's a very, very different kind of promotional experience as well, as far as the efforts that you have to put into when on a podcast like mine, it's going to be half an hour. And most podcasts are going to be somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes on the short end to, if it's an interview at least, to 30 minutes more on average. And some of them will go an hour. Occasionally you get one that goes longer, but one way or another, it means you need good content and good rapport with the hosts. You need to make sure you're in the right space. So yes, if you good in the chat there on LinkedIn, I see that we've got the link to my podcast, to Speaking to Influence, and I would love for you to go and check that out as soon as we're off this call. But feel free to pull it up now so you can take a quick listen when we're done, maybe when you're eating your lunch or something. But okay, so where do we need to go from here? The three audiences that you need to bear in mind and their needs, because we want to meet everybody's needs. Okay, so we've got some people who've been on shows before. We've got people who would be doing their very first podcast and are looking to gear up. So, and if you have questions as far as you're here because you want to know what, if you could say, Laura, if you could just answer these two big questions, I would be so relieved. Because, and I've got lots of stuff to share, but I also want to make sure that if there's something burning that you're really dying to know, that let's make sure we get those in, whether it's up front or at the end, one way or another. Awesome. We've got a couple people who have listened to the podcast. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And look, he listened to the podcast and he came here today. So apparently it was a good experience. I didn't drive him away and say, no, delete, unsubscribe, disconnect from LinkedIn, whatever it happens to be. Good. So share all that kind of stuff. Okay. First of all, know for you, you are the first person whose needs need to be met. Why do you want to be on the show? Why do you want to be on any show? Generally speaking, when we are creating when you're on a show, when you're on a podcast specifically, it's usually because we're looking to expand our reputation as a go-to thought leader, not just as a content expert, right? Because someone who is a content expert gets invited once in hopes of sharing knowledge. Someone who's a content expert who is interesting to listen to and likable, where people enjoy listening to them, there's a connection, that's the person who gets invited back. That's really the key. Where do you become known as a great guest? Because podcast hosts listen to other podcasts as well. And if we hear somebody whose guest was really good and had some interesting stuff that would also fit in my show, that's a great space. Or I may talk to my other podcast host colleagues and say, so who do you know who'd be good on my show? Or, you know what? I had this person on a couple of weeks ago. I think they'd be great if you wanted to reach out to them. They'd probably be, a good fit, and I'm sure they'd love to be on your show as well. So referrals are super important. So being able to do an effective show from start to finish to follow through all adds to that referability. So, okay, think to yourself, why do you want to be on the podcast? What is expanding your thought leadership is one thing, but is it for sales? Is it for promoting a book or a product? Are you what do you want the collateral of having all of these assets available to you to do for you? And by say assets, I mean all these interviews on different shows that you can send as links to anybody else who wants to know more about you. You're going to post it on your website, post it on your LinkedIn profile. What will it do for you? Because that purpose is really important. Always start with the end in mind. Know what your objective is, then you can plan more effectively. Okay. From there, audience number two, or I should say, person number two whose needs must be met. I can speak English today, is the audience. There are more podcasts out there than cable channels. And so when you think about how many millions of podcasts go live every day, the odds that someone's going to pick yours are really, really slim. So we have to figure out, what is it that they want? The analogy that I like to use, and I say this with utter, utter love in my heart as an animal person, as a pet person, is that the average podcast listener, and you can tell me this if you agree, if you are a podcast listener, whether you're a sporadic podcast listener or you're a devoted podcast listener to one or two different shows. But to me, the average podcast listeners, they're not dogs, they're cats. What do I mean by that? Dogs are loyal. They come when they're called. They stay until they're dismissed. They love you no matter what. They'll always come back. That's not your average podcast listener, and I'm one of them. I'm a podcast listener as well. Podcast listeners are cats. Cats are also loving, but they're fickle. They do not come when they're called. They come when they're interested. And they only stay until something else in the other room suddenly distracts them, and then they bolt out of the room with no warning whatsoever. You don't know where they went, and you don't know when they'll be back. So the key becomes, how do you keep the cats in the room, right? What is it that makes people who do not have to be there? How do you keep them there? And understanding also that typically people listening to podcasts multitask. Although I recently read a stat, I think it was yesterday, that like 80% of Gen Z, if you're looking for the younger audience, they don't multitask. We were talking about the high school and college kids and early 20s. So they'll often just, kind of sit on their bed or go for a walk or something and listen to the podcast for its own sake. So they actually, ironically, focus better than those of us in the older generations. But so the audience is listening and they want three things. Number one, they want they want what's called infotainment. Now, infotainment is different from content light. I mean, if you're doing a comedy show or just a personal stories kind of a podcast, and there are plenty of those and they're wonderful. And if that's what you want, great. Then just have fun with it and, tell some fun stories. But if it's a business podcast or a health podcast or whatever other kind of slightly more focused topic podcast, the audience is there because they want to learn something and they want to have fun at the same time. They want to enjoy the experience. Nobody wants to learn from a painful listening experience. So, how do you give them information, the insights, the nuggets, the perspectives that makes them go, "Oh, that's really good. I never thought about it that way." Or, "Oh, I'm totally going to use that." Or, "I'm so going to go look that up." Okay? And have them enjoy it as they're learning. Have them laugh a little bit with you. Use your sense of humor. Let your personality come out. Tell stories. You need to be not just knowledgeable, but likable and interesting. That helps them to feel connected with you. That helps them get in the zone of listening where they're really focused and not, sort of zoning in, zoning out. Next, the third most important person whose needs need to be met, and in many ways it's the first if you plan on getting on the show in the first place, is the host. I run the show for a reason. A lot of reasons, as a matter of fact. I'm not just doing it because I have no time, let me rephrase that, because I have nothing to do and too much time on my hands. It takes a lot of time and effort, a lot of coordination, a lot of people working with me behind the scenes to produce one episode of a podcast, to promote the episode, to source the clients, to do whatever else, or the guests. So the host needs to know that this is going to be the best experience possible for themselves, for you as the guest, and for the audience. So what does the host need? Number one, we want more listeners because we don't just want to talk to 2 or 3 people every week. It's a good start. But of course, like you, we want our listenership to expand and expand because we believe that we have value to share, that people need to hear whatever the message is, and we're here to share it with others. My podcast, Speaking to Influence, I have a very clear focus. It is about the role of communication as an essential leadership skill, period. After 15 years of coaching as an executive coach, a leadership trainer, I've heard patterns. So many people will say to me, "Boy, Laura, I wish someone had told me this earlier. I wish I'd known this sooner in my career. I wish someone had helped me with this before." So I created this podcast with the intention of sharing with whatever up and coming leaders, people moving your way up the career ladder, teaching you what my senior executive clients wish they'd known at your stage. So, but I don't want to be the one teaching. I want to invite them to the show to teach you the lessons and how they learned them. So the questions that I ask are derived from the most important topics that my clients request from me as an executive coach and what I help them learn to do effectively. But then I want them to share their story because the listeners, I find, for what I teach, what I coach, and what I'm sharing in the podcast space, listeners get more engaged when they hear the lesson taught as a story, not as a lecture. So it's really important for the audience to understand what they're going to get from my show. And they come back because they want to hear the stories from my guests. from my primarily senior executive clients, be it for profit or nonprofit. But that's who I want as my audience. And we want that to keep expanding and expanding. We want people to to spread the word. So, in order to do that, what do we need as hosts from our audience, from our guests, and from our partners? And if you're in the public relations space, if you're in the corporate comms space, you're a partner in this. There's a couple things that we really need from you. And let me tell you, those who do it, you have our love, you have our appreciation, you have our gratitude. We will shout your praises from the hilltops. Number one, follow instructions. If the host has an instruction sheet or a link to a website that has instructions or a video that gives instructions, please follow the instructions. We created those for a very, very specific reason, to make the time that we have together that much more efficient. And I'll talk to you later on about what some of those examples are, but just follow the instructions. We do our best to put it all together to make it super simple for you. Plug and play, copy paste. So when we then have to go back and explain things over and over again, because it's clear that the instructions weren't followed, it just makes it really frustrating. And it's harder to make a really optimal interview, because we have to spend too much time with all the other stuff instead of interviewing just with the questions in the conversation. Number two, you want to get on a podcast host's good side before you even start and really get the ball rolling, grease those skids. Go to the show, leave a 5-star rating, and write them a 1-sentence review. And if you are number one, if you're a PR agent or a communications professional representative, that means a lot. You don't have to even leave it from your company perspective, just for you as a user. Listen to the show, loved it, funny, insightful. You have been, can't wait to go back and listen to past episodes, whatever you want, but do the host the favor of leaving the review first. And at the very last, if nothing else, after they've done the episode with you, please leave a review for your client's own episode or for your own episode. It's just good form. It's just a courtesy to help promote everybody else's. Number two, or that was number two. Number three, promote. You don't want to just be on the show and say, hey, thanks for interviewing me. Now tell all of your listeners about me. Please, Laura, can you post on all of your social media outlets and tell everybody how wonderful I am? Oh no, I'm not going to tell people about you. I don't want to have to be bothered with all that social media stuff. I don't want to have to bother marketing, and I'm busy. But you do all the work, and you allow all of your ecosystem participants to go and join and to learn about me. But I'm not going to tell all of my universe about you. That's a very selfish approach. And, years ago, when I was on the first couple of times that I was on a podcast, and definitely before I was hosting a podcast, I confess, I didn't know any better, didn't really understand what it was entailing. I didn't think I had enough of a following on social media to, really matter, but it does. I don't care if you have 10 connections on LinkedIn. Post. Use your hashtags. We will share with you what the hashtags are. We'll share with you graphics. We'll share with you audiograms, etc. Things to post, things to share. On my show, we make it super plug and play easy. So it should not take you more than a minute when our episode goes live to copy, paste, send, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever it is. But please promote. Otherwise, it is just really an act of selfishness to say, thanks for doing the work and making me look good, Laura, but I'm not going to do anything to help you get more people to listen to my interview. So again, to all the original posts whose shows I was on way back when I didn't know any better, please accept my apologies. I would love your forgiveness for that. And if we have a chance to do it again later on, trust me, we'll promote to the hilt. Okay, so help people out there to get the word out. And if nothing else, you want your listenership, your thought leadership to expand. So why wouldn't you share it with everybody else? Yes, we've had some of the guests was a question. We have had amazing guests. And the beauty is that because my show is focusing about the role of of communication as an essential leadership skill. I mean, I have had guests on my show ranging from the massive, from Amazon, from IBM, from Bank of America, from nonprofits like the Foundation for the Support of the United Nations, Alex's Lemonade Stand, Save the Children, more locally oriented organizations like Women Against Abuse. From and I have occasionally had authors. Well, you know what? I'm going to get onto that part later on, but they have really, really ranged from the local to the global. Um, because it's all about and whether they are leaders who are in tech, leaders in finance, leaders in sales and marketing, leaders in environmental science, they're CTOs, CFOs, CEOs, SVPs of this, that, and the other thing, chief information security officers, chief strategy officers. So it's really it's my podcast is industry universal and is role universal as long as you are someone who is currently leading large teams, because my audience are people who are working their way up, moving the career ladder, and want to know what skills they will need to be able to lead larger and larger teams as they move up in their careers. Or they're small business owners who are maybe now leading teams of 5 or 10 or 20, but want to learn how to lead teams of 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, huger organizations. So they want to know what they need to do, what they can't envision for themselves. What did you learn along the way as my guest? And what can they learn from your experience to be more efficient, more effective, more inspirational? And what to sidestep from that matter? What lessons did you learn the hard way? And how can I not make that same mistake? So sharing those little bits of vulnerability as well are super helpful. All right. And yes, by all means, keep putting the questions in the chat. Very happy to answer whatever you've got. Um, yes, and sharing what the guests. So you can go back and look at any of my posts from my business LinkedIn or from my personal LinkedIn, from our Facebook, Instagram, etc. If you see some of my posts advertising or announcing, promoting an episode, not you can like it, you can share it, and actually do both. So share the links if it's your episode on your own with the materials that we send you, send it out to everybody else. But at the same time, come back and see what we've posted about you. Like it, comment on it, share it, and tag us in your comments, because then we get notified that you commented and we go back and we comment. And the more you go back and forth commenting on each other's comments, it keeps it in the feed. It keeps it at the top of the notifications that you'll get for people. And that keeps more and more of your audience and my audience aware of it in case they missed it the first time around. So those little pings back and forth, they seem like they're not much, but let me tell you, they all make a difference. All right. So there are 3 people whose needs need to be met. Yours, why are you here? Be clear on that. Number 2, who's the audience and what do they want? And number 3, the host, what do they need to make this a good investment of everybody's time and give value to everybody? And when you do all of those things, if you follow instructions easily and quickly, ask questions, that's great, but do what the host asks you to do and promote, 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 and be ready. Let me tell you, we as hosts, we will refer you to others. We will make introductions. And if it's the right kind of a show, we'll have you back at some point in the future. We're always glad to have a part 2 down the line. So there's lots of value in this. And again, if you are a PR agent or communications professional representing the guest, you are our best friend. We have some amazing partners out there. Red Thread PR has been a super one. A couple of others who they've learned our system. They follow the system. It's clockwork now. We just know that they give us the kind of guest we're looking for. We do a great job helping them to make the best quality interview possible that gets their message out in a way that our audience gets those communication related skill development nuggets that they want, and everybody's happy and everybody shares and shares. So, shout out to Red Thread and some of our other PR partners. All right, moving on. Part number 2, finding the right show. Being on the right show is really mission critical. And it's not so much that you'd be on the wrong show. It's more that you'll approach the wrong show with a request to get on. So if you are approaching podcast hosts and you are asking them to be on their show, first and foremost, do your due diligence. Don't just look at show titles and guess whose audience you want to be in front of. I can't tell you how frustrating it is when I get a promotion either from an individual themselves who wants to be on my show or a PR agent who sends me somebody and they're like, "Hey, Laura, I have this person with this most amazing story. I know your guests, your audience will love him. He overcame all this adversity. He climbed Mount Everest. He swam the deepest rivers. He lost a leg in the process, and he's this and he's that. Your audience will love his story. He is a great motivational speaker, and they're just going to love him." Really? Do you have any idea what my show is about? I mean, I'm sure your guy's great. I'm sure his story is amazing. I'm sure he's entertaining. I'm sure he's motivational, inspirational, all those other ationals. Do you have any idea what questions I ask on my show? What topics we discuss? You obviously have not done any research. And so that means a couple of things. All that means is you want my audience, regardless of who they are. You think they'll be useful for you, and you just want me to be your lackey and your mouthpiece. You're not interested in giving me any of what I need, or frankly, giving my guests what or my audience what they need. Because while they may in some other space be interested in whatever that topic is, they don't come to me for that information. They come to me for a very specific purpose to gain insights on how to be a more effective communicator and effective, inspiring leader. That's why people listen to my show. So if your person is not going to feed into that desire, why would you want to be on my show? Why would I want to have you on the show? Please read the description first and foremost, and then go see who the other guests have been in the past. And here's a thought: listen to an episode or two. Get a sense of what the show is about. Get a sense of what we're looking for. Show me that you have actually thought this through and aren't just kind of carpet bombing the internet and trying to throw ammo everywhere and hoping that something hits. Don't spam the hosts with profiles hoping that it'll work. Because that really actually makes a challenge, because then when people are sending me just random emails or random LinkedIn's with random profiles, I, as a host, have two choices. Number one, you've already put more work on it for me because I have to figure out if this person will be useful or not because I have no way of guessing. And then either I have to decide, you know what, I can't be bothered. So I'm just going to ignore everything you send. And that certainly doesn't help you. And if you've sent me a list of 4 or 5 people, maybe 1 or 2 would be useful and the others aren't. If I read the first 1 or 2 and I'm going, why am I reading this? This is a waste of my time. This person doesn't know who I am. I may stop reading. And then I'm not going to see that person number 4 on this list actually might have been a good guest. So I don't have that kind of time. Hosts don't have that kind of time. Help us help you. So if you know who we're looking for, pick clients who will be a good fit for this episode or for this show. Alternatively, if I am in a space where I can take the moment and read through, even if I realize that, you know what, none of these people are useful, if I'm going to respond and not just ignore, then I will often write back a blurb. Again, don't want to have to keep writing it, but I will, just saying, thanks. I don't think you understand what our focus is. Here's the topic of the show. Here are the guests I interview. I am not looking for coaches. I am not looking for authors. I am not looking for individual experts in whatever else it is. I just need this. If you have a client who fits that profile, let me know. And now sometimes this has worked really well. There have been a couple of pieces. One just a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact, wrote, you know, did the carpet bomb originally. Here's a great list. And I wrote him back and said, not who I'm looking for. Here's what my show is. Please listen to an episode or two. Here's who I'm looking for. And he wrote back and he said, thanks for the clarification. Let me think about it and get back to you. And I thought, okay, well, that's a polite way of saying, oh, we don't have anybody like that. But to his credit, a few days later, he did get back to me and he sent me 4 names, 4 profiles. 2 of them were maybe sort of, but not quite. And 2 or 3 of them were really solid leads. So he did have it. Would have been a little more efficient had he done the research first and figured that out. But you know what? We got there. And now I've got them both lined up for shows this summer. So I'm super excited about that. And it did work out. But if you really, really, really want to get on the host's good side and make it easier, especially if they're a host that is very high in demand for people who want to be on that show, and you don't want to be pushed out until October, show them that you are the best partner to work with. You make their lives easier. There's a good chance that they will front load your guests, your clients. Let's see. Yes, absolutely, John. Good relationships are based on win-win. So, yep. And if you've been doing that for your guests or for your hosts, then on behalf of them, if they didn't thank you themselves, allow me to thank you on their behalf. Yes, Ralph Galati was a great guest. So many of them have been. Cindy Lewis. Yep, absolutely. Cindy is the CFO of Coho Partners, which is a financial services company. She'd never been on a podcast before. So we did all sorts of prep, and we'll talk about the prep afterwards because some hosts have different versions of preparation. Some just say, hey, just join in. I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions and we'll see where the conversation goes. Much more loosey goosey. If that works for them, great. I'm on the other end of the spectrum for prep. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But Cindy was amazing. And she got to number 37 in Apple Podcasts ranking out of the top 200 for our business management podcasts. And let me tell you, breaking the top 200 at all is a feat. Breaking the top 100, amazing. Breaking the top 50, practically impossible because most of those spots are owned by podcasts that are run by companies like Harvard Business Review, NPR, Forbes, all these other the Wall Street Journal. So they've got armies of people promoting their show. I don't have an army. I have me, I have you, I have a small team of people, but not the force that is those organizations. So to break into the top 50 is almost unheard of. And Cindy hit 37 because she did what we asked her to do. Promoted it to the hilt and asked other people to continue to share. And it's that multiplier effect that launched her to number 37. So kudos to Cindy, a really amazing partner in that and great episode. Go listen to Cindy. She was such a great interview. Okay, so let's see. That's how to find the right shows. Then when you're on the show, what do you need to do? First and foremost, you need to be in the right place. Ask the host if they don't tell you, and they should tell you way in advance, if it is audio only or audio and video. Mine's audio and video because you can also see the full video conversation on my YouTube channel. So you do need to be in a place where you're going to look the way you want to be seen as a guest. If it's just audio, show up in your sweats, hair in a ponytail, just getting back from the gym. As long as you sound good, who cares? But if you're going to be on camera, then you want to think about, okay, what does your background look like? Is there stuff back there? Is the cat litter box back there and it's been 3 days since you cleaned it? What don't you want to have be visible? How is your lighting? Do you look like you're in the witness protection program with just a great big picture window behind you? And so your face is all shadowed and dark. That's not helpful. It doesn't do your brand justice. Remember, we're expanding your reputation as a thought leader. If we can't see your face, it looks like you're hiding. That doesn't say leadership. But at the very base, absolutely required, you need a good microphone. I've got my little Lamborghini mic here because of what I do. I need to have the best quality possible. You don't need a Lamborghini. You should be driving a Tesla. not a skateboard, not a tricycle. If you are using the microphone that comes with your laptop, you're riding a tricycle, and the host is most likely in some sort of Tesla or Lamborghini. So, what is it? And let me show you, and let me tell you why this matters. I'm going to sound like this. I'm going to sound like you've been listening to. This is the quality of the audio in my podcast. And what we don't want, let's see if I can shift this here. Where's my, there we go. What we want to make sure does not happen is that you must not sound like this. Do you hear a difference? I bet you do. And if you're just using your internal mic or the one that comes on your webcam, if you have one of those Logitech webcams where the microphone is sort of built into it, or a Jabra Puck, those kinds of things that sit on your desk someplace, they are terrible. Even brands like Bose. I look, you want to do surround sound in the man cave? Absolutely. Bose speakers, knock yourself out. They are awesome. Was on with a client yesterday who was so proud of herself because she had bought this amazing set of Bose headphones. And so everything sounded crystal clear to her. She didn't realize that she sounded like this, even though the headphones had a microphone built into them somewhere. It wasn't a little boom mic in front of the mouth, but it was on the earpieces themselves. Had no idea. I had to tell her, you actually sound better just using the internal mic on your computer than in these probably $200 headphones. So she was dismayed, but at least grateful that I told her. And, it's funny. I will, because of who my clients are, again, my job is to protect and amplify their reputation as senior leaders in whatever corporations. So if we get on the prep call first and you sound like this, then no, I'm not going to record. Between the prep call and the interview, you need to get a better microphone so that it does you justice. And let's see. So I'm going to go back because you've listened to crummy sound for more than long enough. Okay. Better? That should sound better. You can confirm in the chat if that sounds better, if you can hear the difference now. But I would absolutely, absolutely, absolutely never allow a guest to come on my show if I sound like this and they sound like this, because it makes them sound amateur. It makes them sound unprofessional. It makes people dislike the sound. It makes people not want to listen. If they have to sit there and go, what did he say? Ugh, it's too much work to figure it out. Let me go listen to something else. People will not work. They will not put in effort to figure out what your words are. Either they just hear it and it's easy, or the cats bolt into the other room. Get a good microphone. And I am very happy to share with you my list. So if you send me an email or go to my website for the podcast is speakingtoinfluence.com. If you go to speakingtoinfluence.com, there should be a nice little pop-up that says, if you want my list of equipment that I recommend to podcast guests, you can get it right there on the website. So by all means, upgrade your content. $100 to $150 is a really solid range where you'll get a good piece of equipment without breaking the bank. And again, it's your brand. So you may think to yourself, do I really want to spend $100 on a mic? From my heart, you can't afford not to. You just can't. If you're looking for this to promote your career in one way, shape, or form, you buy shoes that cost more than that. So invest in this, because every person you ever speak to on any meeting will hear you differently. Yes. So do not log in from your iPhone. Do not log in for your interview on a tablet. No. Laptop, real camera, HD camera is definitely better, again, than whatever comes in your with your device. And good microphone is critical. So no portable devices. I mean, laptops, okay, but not from the phone, not from the tablet, especially because when you're holding them in the horizontal, you have it propped up or something, then what you don't realize is that over there on the edge of your phone is where the camera is. But you wanna be able to look in the audience and have the audience feel like you're looking at them. But it's hard because your guest will be on the screen, which is over here. So you're looking at yourself and you're looking at the guest, or you're looking at the host on the screen talking to them, not realizing that the camera is somewhere else. So again, it just looks utterly unprofessional. That doesn't do justice to your brand. I won't record the interview if that's what we're going to do, because I would never do anything that would undermine your brand when my goal is to amplify it. That's the win-win for everybody. Okay. Aside from that, many times the guest or the host, excuse me, will send a link for you to fill out a little application with all of your social media information, with all of your contact information. If you are a representative, please make sure that somewhere in there, I understand that you want the host to talk to you first, that you're sharing your contact information, your email, your cell phone, etc. But the host needs to have the guests' contact information, because if we need to contact the guest, they're not showing up on time or they're having trouble with something. If I need to contact you right now because we're supposed to have this interview, they didn't show up, I need to be able to text them and say, "Hi, waiting for you here. Let me know if you're having trouble with the link," or whatever it is. If I'm contacting the only number I have and it's the agent and they don't know where the guest is because they don't work for the same company, they're not in the same building, then you're just gonna that's way too much. That's a grenade in my show, and it throws off my production cycle. Which is the other thing, by the way. Different shows have different production cycles. Some are only recording episodes maybe 1 to 2 weeks in advance. Some are recording episodes months in advance. They've got dozens and dozens of shows, quote unquote, in the hopper waiting for release. But if it's a tighter one, please don't cancel or postpone the episode on the day of, or even a day or two in advance, because that really changes where they placed other people to do the recordings. They would have had somebody else record sooner. Now they're screwed. They don't have anybody for the next week for their episode. Again, you don't know who's how far booked out, but it really, really, really messes up the whole team, because it does take a team of people to produce a podcast episode. It throws off everybody's cycle if for whatever reason you just decide, you know what, I'm a little busy right now. I'll do this another time. Please don't do that to the host. Do your best to honor that commitment for that time block. Yes, the Shure SM78. Thank you, Alejandro. Anything Shure, Shure. This is a Shure microphone. Shures are great quality. They're performance mics. Just make sure whatever it is, it has that the plug for your computer is USB-C, something along those lines. Because you don't want to buy one that has the plug that doesn't fit into whatever jacks are in your computer. If you're on an iPad Air, or not a, excuse me, a MacBook Air, it may only have a USB-C port. So if you get a mic that has a USB-A connector, it won't work. Don't bother buying the connectors, the adapters. Get a mic that has the right one. Just look it up as you purchase. I'm using a Shure SM7B, which is a little higher rank than the SM48. But again, anything by Shure is going to be a good quality sound. Audio Technica, the AT2020, or I think there's a more recent version of that. That's always a consistent sound. Yeti mics have the best branding, and I would say they're probably the most popular brand. I don't know that they are the best quality. I think for the money, you can do better. So, we'll leave it at that for now. Um, let's see. Let's talk about a couple things in answering questions and doing the actual show. Number one, to the extent that you have that the host shares questions with you, sometimes on the prep call, and they will always do a prep call. Let me phrase that. They'll almost always do a prep call. And there are two kinds of prep calls. Either because the show goes in all different directions as you're telling stories and they have a wide range and they want to know what your topic is and what you want to talk about. So they'll do work with you to figure out, like, what are some good questions that you want me to ask you, and they'll kind of co-create the content of the show. So they need to know more about you to make sure that they're asking good questions. Or there are shows like mine that have a much more consistently structured show, and I have a list of guiding questions that I use for most shows, but we're not gonna get to all the questions on every show, and for each question, I'll tangent and we'll go down rabbit holes following up, but I wanna make sure you're prepping with me the kind of stories that you want to tell, because for me, 2 things matter. Number 1, there's a difference between giving advice and telling a story. People can learn the advice from the story. They will derive it for themselves. Whatever lesson they needed to learn, if you tell a story well, they will take away something from it. They'll get that nugget. But if so, here's a hint. Here's a really, really, really critical, massively counterintuitive tip, especially if you're in the leadership space. It's going to go against all conventional wisdom that you've had. When telling a story, you want to use the word I or use the word that. You're talking about you interacting with somebody else or an experience you have. Share your story. People want to hear your story. Do not slide into you. If you are running a company and you want to get better at this and you want to sleep better, you want to maximize your time, you want to have better health, you want to do this, then you should do this and you should do like want. That's advice. If this is an advice show and the host says, give us 3 tips. What are 3 things that we can do better to do this? That's different. The host is asking you for advice. Share the advice. Here's one thing you can do. Here's another thing you can do. Here's a third thing you can do. If the host is asking you to tell stories, keep it first person and third person to the extent that you're talking about somebody else, but minimal use of the you, because that gets into generic references, which lands differently on a cognitive level. The brain processes stories and I differently from the advice and the you, and people connect more with the story. So really see what kind of questions. If the host says, tell a story here, tell a story here, be mindful, tell your stories. Next, the the tone of it matters. Almost every podcast, as I mentioned before, that there's that infotainment piece, and you as the guest are looking to be both informative, useful, knowledgeable, and likable, relatable, magnetic in that way. So have fun. Take your content seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. Make fun of yourself if you want. I had a little tech flub in the beginning. Okay, you roll with it. Don't fall to pieces about it. Just, you can laugh at yourself, tease little banter back and forth with the host, share some stories that maybe in the beginning it was like, here's where I messed up. Those are super helpful. Don't want to say, no, I'm only perfect. I don't want anybody to know whenever I'm human or where I made a mistake that I could have learned from. I just want you to think that I've always been perfect because that's my brand. Trust me, nobody wants that. So throw yourself under the bus. Share a mistake that you made, share an embarrassing moment, share a fun, and laugh at it. Have fun with the host, laugh together. That just helps people enjoy the process. And then finally, if you do get questions from the host, either preset questions or questions that you and the host collaboratively come up with, preparation of your answers matters. It's very important to find that middle ground. We don't want you to wing it, but we don't want you to script it. Because when you wing it, chances are what you think is a 2-minute answer becomes a 10-minute rambling tangent, and the host is going and looking for a way to kind of jump in, going, I kind of asked you about this, and I know you think you're getting there, but you're giving so much background information and tangential this and that. Like, I'm not interested in this part. We're going to lose my audience. So focus, prep, bullet point for yourself to figure out what are the 2 or 3 key components you need to include. Maybe even practice answering it once or twice just to time it, to see, do you expect this answer to take you 2 minutes? Did it take you 45 seconds or 45 minutes in actuality? So do those little checks. That makes for so much better, because if it's too long, then I have the obligation as a host of editing. I have to decide, where am I going to cut you off? Because I can't let you talk for 45 minutes if it's a 30-minute show. So I have to figure out how to splice and try to make it sound cohesive and or decide if I just got to take this whole answer out. And I have done that. Um, so, take your content seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. And prep the answers, but don't script. There's nothing worse than except the other extreme that I just mentioned of just rambling uselessly. The equal and opposite offense is to script it too much, because when you've scripted the whole thing out and then you try to read it, even if you try to read it naturally on the screen, you will sound like a fifth grader reading their "What I Did on My Summer Vacation" essay. It just doesn't feel authentic. You don't write the way that you talk. It never feels conversational. It just lacks that connection, and the cats will meander out of the room. So, all that to say, quick wrap up, follow instructions, connect with the audience, be human, and carry your weight as the guest and as the representative, and help us to help you by getting the word out. This is what makes the most referable, reinvitable, to coin a word, guest. So, with that, I will invite you, please subscribe to the Speaking to Influence podcast. If you got value out of this, would love to see a message in LinkedIn, connect with me, etc. Post. Go to LinkedIn Live, excuse me, go to Apple Podcasts or whatever your platform of choice is. Leave me a 5-star review and a rating, I should say. Leave a review as a thank you. We all appreciate that. And I'll be happy to message back with you. And of course, if you have a client or if you yourself believe that you're a good fit for the Speaking to Influence podcast, I would love to have a conversation and see if it really is a good fit. And if it's not, how I can help you figure out a better podcast that would be a good fit. I'm so grateful to you on behalf of all podcast hosts for taking time to listen to this today and figure out really what does it take to help you, the host, and the audience get the most amazing value out of the experience of working together and being on a podcast. Yes, do post any major takeaways today. Let me know what they are. If you put them in the chat, what are your big takeaways today? And any final questions that you have, I'm happy to stick around and answer any others. You can also just post in the chat following this, following our LinkedIn Live today. I'm happy to keep responding in those chats as well. But yes, when you post, please do tag. Definitely appreciate that. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. Check out the YouTube Live, where the video will be posted, and the LinkedIn Live, where we will have the video as well, for that matter. But join me on the Speaking to Influence podcast. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.